My name is Roberta, and at 54 years old, I never imagined I would discover the most painful betrayal of my life would come from my own son. After 30 years as an accountant and 3 years of widowhood, I thought I had learned to read people pretty well. Living alone in our family home in Denver, I cherished the regular visits from my 28-year-old son Marcus and his girlfriend Jessica. But lately, something felt different about the way they looked at me, the way they spoke to me like I was some fragile old woman who couldn't understand the world around her. Before I share what happened next, I would love to know where you are watching from. Please, hit that like button and subscribe if you enjoy stories about family secrets that change everything. Trust me, you will want to hear how this unfolds. The house felt too big sometimes, all 4 bedrooms echoing with memories of David and the life we built together. When my husband passed from cancer 3 years ago, I thought the loneliness might consume me. But early retirement from my accounting firm gave me a pension of $4,200 monthly, plus my savings of $380,000 and David's life insurance. The house, worth about $750,000, was completely paid off. I was comfortable, financially secure, and slowly learning to live independently. Marcus had always been my pride and joy. Even as an adult working at a real estate company, he still called me Mom with that same warmth from childhood. His income was inconsistent, though, and I knew he struggled with credit card debt. When he told me about owing $35,000 on various cards, I helped him pay down a significant portion. That's what mothers do, right? We help our children when they need it most. Jessica entered our lives 2 years ago, and I immediately adored her. At 26, she worked in marketing and had this infectious laugh that reminded me of myself at her age. She was smart, ambitious, and seemed to genuinely care for Marcus. I often told friends that Jessica felt like the daughter I never had. She would help me with grocery shopping, listen to my stories about David, and always remembered to ask about my doctor appointments. Their relationship appeared solid, and I secretly hoped they would marry soon. Marcus often confided in me about their future plans, their struggles with money, their dreams of buying a house together. When Jessica mentioned feeling broody lately, my heart soared thinking about potential grandchildren. I imagined Sunday dinners filled with little voices, Christmas mornings with toys, scattered everywhere, the joy of watching Marcus become a father. But over the past few months, something shifted in their visits. The conversations became more focused on my well-being, my health, my ability to manage daily tasks. Jessica would comment on how I seemed to move more slowly, how I sometimes forgot where I placed my reading glasses. Marcus started asking pointed questions about my finances, whether I had updated my will recently, if I had considered long-term care insurance. Initially, I interpreted their concern as love. After losing David, having people worry about me felt comforting. They were planning for my future, thinking ahead about potential challenges that might arise. But their questions became more frequent, more specific. They wanted to know about my retirement accounts, my investment portfolio, the exact value of the house. When I asked why they needed such detailed information, they assured me it was just responsible planning. The first real warning sign came when Jessica casually mentioned a beautiful senior living community she had seen advertised. She described it in glowing terms, emphasizing the social activities, the medical care on site, the freedom from home maintenance responsibilities. When I expressed little interest, Marcus jumped in to support her enthusiasm, talking about how much easier my life could be without worrying about yard work repairs or household management. I started noticing other changes, too. They seemed impatient when I took time to process information, exchanging glances, when I asked them to repeat something or slow down their explanations about technology. Marcus offered to help me set up online banking, saying it would be much more convenient than driving to the bank branch. Jessica suggested I might benefit from a medical alert system, just in case something happened when I was alone. Their visits, once filled with laughter and genuine conversation, began to feel like evaluations. They watched how I moved around the kitchen, noted when I forgot to turn off a light, commented on my occasional confusion about new television remote controls. I felt like I was being studied, measured against some invisible standard of competence. The pressure intensified when Marcus confided about a new financial crisis. He and Jessica were looking at houses, but he needed another $50,000 for a down payment. Additionally, Jessica had some exciting news. She thought she might be pregnant, though it was still very early to tell. They painted a picture of a young family struggling to establish themselves while caring for an aging mother who might need assistance sooner rather than later. The subtle suggestions became more direct as winter approached. During one particularly long visit, Jessica brought up the topic of power of attorney, explaining how important it was for families to plan ahead. She had done research, she claimed, and found that many elderly people benefited from having trusted family members help manage complex financial decisions. Marcus nodded earnestly, describing friends whose parents had suffered financially because they waited too long to get proper legal protection in place. He painted scenarios of confusion, missed payments, potential exploitation by strangers who might take advantage of an older person living alone. The way he spoke, it sounded like transferring financial control was not just wise, but necessary for my own protection. They began bringing printed articles about elder fraud stories of seniors who lost everything because they were too proud or stubborn to accept help. Jessica would read these aloud during coffee, shaking her head sympathetically at tales of financial ruin. Marcus would add commentary about how grateful those families must have been to have responsible children who could step in during difficult times. The conversations always circled back to my situation. How difficult it must be to manage everything alone. How complicated modern banking had become. How easy it would be for someone to take advantage of my trusting nature. They spoke with such conviction, such apparent concern that I almost began to doubt my own capabilities. Jessica started visiting more frequently, often dropping by unannounced to check on me. She would arrive with small gifts, flowers, my favorite pastries from the bakery downtown. During these visits, she would casually assess my daily routines, asking about my sleep patterns, my appetite, whether I had been feeling confused or forgetful lately. She had a gentle way of probing that felt caring rather than intrusive. Did I ever forget to lock doors? Had I missed any important phone calls? Was I keeping up with bill payments? When I assured her that everything was fine, she would smile and pat my hand, saying how wonderful it was that I was still so independent. Marcus, meanwhile, intensified his financial sob story. The credit cards were becoming unmanageable again. The housing market was competitive, and they needed to act quickly to secure their dream home. Jessica's pregnancy, if confirmed, would require them to move fast before she became too uncomfortable to house hunt. Time pressure became a constant theme in our conversations. They painted a picture of a small window of opportunity that was rapidly closing. Interest rates might rise. The perfect house might be sold to someone else. Jessica's condition might become complicated, requiring expensive medical care. Every conversation contained some element of urgency, some reason why delay would be catastrophic for their future. The nursing home brochures appeared gradually. First, Jessica mentioned seeing an advertisement for a lovely place called Golden Sunset Manor. Then, she happened to drive past another facility that looked absolutely beautiful. Before long, she was collecting pamphlets and information packets, studying them with the dedication of someone planning a vacation. She would spread these materials across my kitchen table, pointing out amenities and services with genuine enthusiasm. Look at their dining room. Notice the beautiful gardens. See how they offer transportation to medical appointments and shopping. Every feature was presented as a luxury, a convenience, a benefit that would improve my quality of life immeasurably. Marcus supported her research with his own observations about friends whose parents lived in similar communities. He spoke glowingly about how social they became, how their health improved with regular activities and medical oversight, how much peace of mind their children experienced knowing their parents were safe and cared for. Slowly but surely, they were building a case that moving to assisted living was not just reasonable but desirable. They made it sound like I would be doing myself a favor, treating myself to a better lifestyle, while simultaneously relieving them of worry about my well-being. The manipulation was so gradual, so loving in its presentation, that I almost missed how calculated it had become. Everything changed on a Tuesday afternoon when I returned early from grocery shopping. I had forgotten my reusable bags and decided to come home to get them, rather than buy plastic ones. As I approached the front door, I heard voices from inside. Marcus and Jessica were having an animated conversation in my living room, and something about their tone made me pause. I quietly entered through the kitchen door, setting down my purse as silently as possible. Their voices carried clearly through the open doorway, and what I heard made my blood run cold. They were discussing me like I was a problem to be solved, an obstacle to be managed, a resource to be harvested. Marcus's voice was casual, almost amused. Mom is getting slower every day. Did you see how confused she got when I tried to show her the banking app? She pretended to understand, but I could tell she was completely lost. She's definitely declining faster than I expected. Jessica laughed, a sound that no longer seemed warm and caring. She's so trusting, though. Yesterday, she asked me to explain the nursing home brochures again like she was actually considering it. I think she really believes we're looking out for her best interests. Of course she does, Marcus replied. She's always seen me as her responsible son who would never hurt her. She has no idea we've already contacted Golden Sunset about availability. The administrator said they have a beautiful single room opening up next month for $6,000 monthly. My legs felt weak. I gripped the kitchen counter, struggling to process what I was hearing. My own son was planning to institutionalize me against my will, and they were both laughing about how easy I was to deceive. Jessica's voice continued. The financial power of attorney papers are ready. Your lawyer friend did a great job making them look official and protective. Once she signs those, we can start the process of selling this house. $700,000 should cover the nursing home costs for years, plus give us enough for our down payment. Marcus agreed enthusiastically. Exactly. And the beauty of it is, she'll think she's being responsible by planning ahead. We'll tell her it's just a precaution, something to have in place for emergencies. She'll never suspect we plan to use it immediately. They discussed logistics with business-like efficiency. Which room would need to be cleared first for staging the house? How quickly they could get a real estate assessment? Whether Jessica should be the one to present the papers, since Mom seemed to trust her more. They had contingency plans, backup strategies, responses prepared for every possible objection I might raise. The most crushing part was hearing how well they knew me, how accurately they had analyzed my personality and vulnerabilities. They understood exactly which emotional buttons to push, which fears to exploit, which hopes to manipulate. They had studied me like a target, mapping out my weaknesses with scientific precision. Jessica mentioned how pathetic it was that I still talked about David as if he had just stepped out of the room. Marcus laughed about my attempts to stay current with technology, calling my efforts cute, but ultimately pointless. They mimicked my voice, my mannerisms, my concerns about being a burden on them. Every conversation we had shared, every confidence I had trusted them with, had been cataloged as ammunition for their scheme. As I stood frozen in my kitchen, listening to them dissect my life and plan my future, without any regard for my wishes, I felt something fundamental shift inside me. The grief and shock were overwhelming, but underneath those emotions, anger began to burn. Not the explosive rage of betrayal, but the cold, calculating fury of someone who had just learned exactly what kind of people she was dealing with. They were still talking when I quietly slipped back outside, got in my car, and drove around the neighborhood for an hour while I processed what I had discovered. By the time I returned home, they were gone, having left a cheerful note about looking forward to our weekend dinner together. That night, I sat in David's old chair and forced myself to think clearly about my situation. 28 years of motherhood, countless sacrifices, endless love and support, and this was how Marcus chose to repay me. Not with gratitude or genuine care, but with betrayal so calculating it took my breath away. But I was not the helpless old woman they believed me to be. 3 decades as an accountant had taught me to analyze problems systematically, to plan carefully, to anticipate consequences. They thought my age made me vulnerable, but they had forgotten that experience is a powerful weapon when wielded by someone who knows how to use it. The next morning, I called Margaret Thompson, the family lawyer who had helped David and me with estate planning over the years. Margaret was sharp, ethical, and had no patience for elder abuse in any form. When I explained what I had discovered, she immediately cleared her schedule to meet with me that afternoon. Margaret listened to my story with growing anger and professional focus. She confirmed that what Marcus and Jessica were planning constituted attempted financial elder abuse regardless of their family relationship to me. She also assured me that their scheme had several legal vulnerabilities that we could exploit to protect my assets and autonomy. We spent 3 hours developing a comprehensive counter-strategy. First, we would revise my will and estate planning documents to reflect the new reality of Marcus's character. Instead of inheriting the house and the majority of my assets, he would receive a modest trust fund with strict conditions attached. The bulk of my estate would go to charities I cared about with specific provisions preventing Marcus from contesting the changes. Margaret helped me establish a revocable living trust that would protect my assets while preserving my complete control over them. She also prepared documentation that would allow us to pursue legal action if Marcus and Jessica attempted to proceed with their fraud. In Colorado, recording conversations without consent was legal in certain circumstances, particularly when documenting potential crimes. We discussed the emotional cost of what I was planning. Margaret warned me that exposing Marcus would likely destroy our relationship permanently. There would be no going back once I revealed that I knew about his betrayal. Was I prepared to lose my son to protect my independence and dignity? The question haunted me, but every time I wavered, I remembered their laughter, their casual cruelty, their complete disregard for my humanity. They had already decided to sacrifice our relationship for money. I was simply refusing to be a passive victim in their scheme. Margaret also connected me with resources for older adults facing family financial abuse. I learned that my situation was unfortunately common, that many seniors experienced similar betrayals from adult children struggling with money problems. The support network she introduced me to helped me understand that protecting myself was not selfish or vindictive, but necessary and brave. We scheduled follow-up appointments to finalize all the legal changes. Margaret would file the new documents within the week, ensuring that my assets were completely protected before Marcus and Jessica made their move. She also prepared a restraining order that could be activated immediately if they attempted any form of coercion or intimidation. The hardest part was maintaining my normal routine while knowing what I knew. I had to continue interacting with them naturally, pretending to be the naive, trusting mother they believed me to be. Every conversation became a performance, every smile a carefully constructed facade. The following week tested every acting ability I possessed. Marcus called Monday morning with his usual cheerful greeting, asking how I was feeling and whether I needed anything from the store. I forced warmth into my voice, chatting about the weather and my plans for the day. He mentioned that he and Jessica wanted to stop by later in the week to discuss some important family matters. I agreed enthusiastically, playing my role perfectly. Tuesday brought Jessica with fresh flowers and homemade cookies. She settled into the kitchen chair where she always sat, spreading nursing home brochures across the table with practiced casualness. This time, I studied them with apparent interest, asking questions about room sizes, meal plans, and visiting policies. Jessica's eyes lit up with excitement as she interpreted my questions as genuine consideration rather than information gathering. "Oh, Roberta," she said, leaning forward conspiratorially. "I really think you would love the social aspects. They have book clubs, art classes, even day trips to museums and theaters. You would meet so many interesting people your own age." I nodded, thoughtfully commenting on how nice it would be to have friends nearby. Jessica immediately launched into enthusiastic descriptions of communal dining, planned activities, and the security of having medical staff available around the clock. Every benefit she described was actually a freedom I would be losing, but I pretended to find her arguments compelling. Wednesday's conversation with Marcus focused on practical concerns about managing the house. He had noticed that the gutters needed cleaning, the driveway required resealing, and the furnace would need its annual inspection soon. The maintenance responsibilities were becoming overwhelming, he suggested, especially for someone my age living alone. I played into his narrative perfectly, expressing mild anxiety about these tasks and wondering aloud how I would manage them. Marcus immediately volunteered to handle everything, but then paused dramatically as if struck by a sudden thought. Perhaps it was time to consider whether maintaining such a large property still made sense for my situation. His performance was masterful, I had to admit. He managed to sound genuinely concerned while systematically undermining my confidence in my own capabilities. He mentioned elderly neighbors who had fallen behind on home maintenance and suffered expensive consequences. He described friends whose parents had been overwhelmed by property management and made costly mistakes. Thursday brought the most intensive pressure yet. Both Marcus and Jessica arrived with flowers takeout from my favorite Chinese restaurant and serious expressions that suggested important conversations ahead. They had been thinking about my future, they said, and wanted to share some ideas about how to ensure my continued safety and happiness. Jessica produced a folder containing information about financial planning for seniors. She had researched the best strategies for protecting assets while ensuring access to quality care as needs changed over time. Marcus added supporting commentary about the complexity of modern financial management and the peace of mind that came from having trustworthy family members involved in important decisions. They presented their research with impressive thoroughness, displaying charts about healthcare costs, statistics about senior financial vulnerability, and testimonials from families who had implemented comprehensive care planning. Everything was designed to convince me that taking action immediately was not just wise but urgent. The conversation gradually shifted toward specific next steps. They had consulted with a lawyer who specialized in elder care planning, Marcus explained. This attorney had prepared some basic documentation that would protect my interests while giving them the ability to help manage complex financial matters if I ever needed assistance. Jessica emphasized repeatedly that these documents were just precautionary measures, safety nets that would only be activated if I became unable to handle things myself. They painted a picture of gradual, collaborative transition rather than immediate change. I would maintain complete control unless and until I chose to delegate specific responsibilities. Friday brought the actual paperwork. Marcus and Jessica arrived with official-looking documents in a leather portfolio, their manner suggesting the importance of what they were proposing. They explained each section carefully, emphasizing the protective nature of the power of attorney provisions and the reversibility of any decisions made under the agreement. I read through everything slowly, asking questions that made me sound confused rather than suspicious. What exactly would happen if I signed these papers? How much control would I be giving up? Could I change my mind later if I wanted to handle things differently? Their answers were designed to reassure me, but every response revealed more about their true intentions. They were prepared for my hesitation, offering to leave the documents with me for careful consideration over the weekend. Marcus suggested that I might want to pray about the decision or discuss it with friends whose judgment I trusted. Jessica added that they were in no hurry, that my comfort with the process was more important than any timeline they might prefer. By Sunday evening, they were clearly anxious for my decision. Marcus called twice to check on me, asking whether I had questions about the paperwork or needed any clarification about their proposal. I told them I was still thinking and praying about such an important decision, but that I would be ready to discuss everything when they visited Monday afternoon. Monday morning arrived gray and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I had spent the weekend in final preparation reviewing my legal strategies with Margaret, practicing my responses to likely scenarios and steeling myself for what would probably be the most difficult conversation of my life. Marcus and Jessica arrived precisely at 2:00, carrying flowers and wearing expressions of hopeful anticipation. They settled into their usual places in the living room, the official documents spread across the coffee table like weapons disguised as gifts. Their confidence was palpable, their certainty that they had successfully manipulated me evident in every gesture. "So, Mom," Marcus began with studied casualness, "have you had a chance to think about everything we discussed? I know it's a big decision, but Jessica and I really feel like this planning could give you so much peace of mind." I smiled warmly, playing my role one final time. "Oh, I've thought about it constantly. In fact, I have something I want to share with both of you before we make any decisions." I reached for my purse, extracting my phone with deliberate slowness. "I recorded something last week that I think you should hear." Their expressions shifted slightly, confusion replacing confidence as I navigated to the audio file. Marcus leaned forward, still unsure where this was heading. Jessica's smile became strained, some instinct warning her that the script was about to change dramatically. I pressed play, and their own voices filled the room with devastating clarity. Marcus discussing my declining mental state with casual amusement, Jessica laughing about my trusting nature and gullibility, their detailed planning for selling my house and institutionalizing me against my will, their mockery of my grief for David and their contempt for my efforts to stay current with modern technology. The color drained from both their faces as the recording continued. Marcus tried to interrupt, reaching toward my phone, but I moved it away from his grasp. Jessica began shaking her head as if denying what we were all clearly hearing. But there was no arguing with their own words, no explaining away their calculated cruelty. When the recording ended, silence filled the room like a physical presence. I looked at my son, seeing him clearly, for perhaps the first time in his adult life. The charming smile was gone, replaced by panic and desperate calculation. Jessica appeared to be in shock, her mouth opening and closing soundlessly. 28 years, I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotional earthquake occurring inside me. 28 years I spent raising you, teaching you right from wrong, sacrificing so you could have opportunities I never had. Your father and I went without vacations, drove old cars, wore clothes until they fell apart, all so you could have music lessons, sports, equipment, college tuition. Marcus found his voice first. Mom, that recording, you don't understand the context. We were just worried about you trying to figure out how to help. Sometimes when people are stressed, they say things that sound worse than they mean. I held up my hand, stopping his explanation. Do not insult my intelligence any further. I heard you planning to steal my house, planning to lock me away in a nursing home, planning to take control of money I spent 30 years earning. You called me pathetic. You laughed about my grief for your father. Jessica tried a different approach, tears beginning to form in her eyes. Roberta, please, you have to understand. We love you so much, and we were just scared about your future. Maybe we expressed our concerns badly, but everything we talked about was meant to protect you. I turned to her with cold clarity. You researched nursing homes without my knowledge. You contacted lawyers about power of attorney documents designed to strip away my rights. You calculated how much money you could get by selling my home. That is not protection, Jessica. That is theft. Marcus stood up, his posture becoming aggressive. This is ridiculous. We're your family. We have every right to be concerned about your welfare. You're obviously not thinking clearly if you're secretly recording private conversations and jumping to these paranoid conclusions. Sit down, I said with authority that surprised all of us. I am not finished speaking, and you will listen to what I have to say. He remained standing, but Jessica pulled him back onto the sofa. The power dynamic in the room had shifted completely, and they were beginning to realize that their carefully constructed scheme was collapsing around them. I reached into my purse again this time, producing official-looking documents from Margaret's office. While you were planning my future, I was planning my own. These are updated estate planning documents executed last Friday with the assistance of my attorney. Marcus, you are no longer my primary beneficiary. His face went white. What are you talking about? I am talking about consequences. You chose to see me as a resource to be exploited rather than a mother to be respected. The house will be sold upon my death with proceeds going to Alzheimer's research and senior advocacy organizations. You will receive a modest trust fund with conditions attached that require you to demonstrate significant character growth over the next 5 years. Jessica started crying in earnest now, seeing their dreams of easy money evaporating before their eyes. Marcus looked stunned, as if he couldn't process that his mild-mannered mother had outmaneuvered him so completely. Furthermore, I continued, I have documented evidence of your attempted financial elder abuse, which my attorney assures me could result in criminal charges if you choose to pursue any legal action against these changes. I suggest you accept the consequences of your choices with whatever dignity you can manage. Marcus exploded. You can't do this. I'm your son. That money, this house, it's supposed to be my inheritance. We were trying to help you. You were trying to help yourselves to my assets while I was still alive to watch you do it. That is not inheritance, Marcus. That is robbery. I stood up, my voice gaining strength. I want both of you to leave my house now. Do not contact me unless you are prepared to offer sincere apologies and make genuine amends for your behavior. Jessica tried one last appeal. Please, Roberta, don't let a misunderstanding destroy our relationship. We can work this out. We can explain everything properly if you just give us a chance. I walked to the front door, opening it wide. There is no misunderstanding. I heard exactly what you think of me, exactly what you plan to do to me. Leave now, or I will call the police and have you removed for trespassing. They gathered their things in stunned silence, the power of attorney documents forgotten on the coffee table. Marcus paused at the door, seeming to search for words that might salvage the situation, but I had nothing left to say to him. Jessica touched my arm gently as she passed, but I stepped away from her reach. As they walked down the front steps, I heard Jessica whisper urgently to Marcus about damage control, about finding ways to fix what had just happened. But it was far too late for fixes. They had revealed their true characters, and I had responded in kind. The relationship we had pretended to have was over, replaced by the honest dynamic they had forced into existence. 3 months passed before I heard from either of them again. The silence was painful but necessary, like cleaning a wound that has become infected. I spent those months discovering who I was without the burden of their false concern and hidden agendas. Margaret helped me establish new routines that emphasized my independence and capabilities. I joined a senior center book club, started taking watercolor painting classes, and volunteered with an organization that educated older adults about financial protection. Staying active and engaged turned out to be the best possible response to their suggestions that I was declining mentally. I also began traveling, something David and I had always planned to do more of in retirement. Short trips at first, then longer excursions to places I had always wanted to see. Each journey reinforced my confidence in my ability to navigate the world independently, to make decisions, to handle unexpected situations with competence and grace. The phone call from Jessica came on a Wednesday evening in late spring. Her voice was tentative, almost childlike, as she asked if I would be willing to listen to what she had to say. Against my better judgment, I agreed to hear her out. "Roberta," she began, "I need you to know that I am no longer with Marcus. We broke up 2 weeks after that awful day at your house. I realized that if he could treat his own mother so coldly, he would eventually treat me the same way." I remained silent, letting her continue. "I was wrong to participate in what we were planning. I got caught up in Marcus's vision of an easy solution to his money problems, but I should have recognized how cruel and manipulative our approach was. You trusted me, and I betrayed that trust for financial gain. I am deeply sorry." Her apology sounded genuine, but apologies cannot undo betrayal or restore broken trust. I thanked her for calling and wished her well in her future endeavors, but I did not invite her back into my life. Some damage is simply too extensive to repair. Marcus's attempt at reconciliation came in the form of a brief email 6 months later. He acknowledged that his approach had been wrong and expressed regret for the pain he had caused. But his message focused more on his own suffering from our estrangement than on genuine understanding of why his actions had been so hurtful. I replied with equal brevity, telling him that I hoped he would learn from this experience and become a better person. I also informed him that the trust fund established in my updated will remained available to him if he chose to meet its conditions, which included completing counseling and demonstrating sustained ethical behavior over several years. He never responded to that email, and I have not heard from him since. The healing process was gradual, but ultimately transformative. Initially, the grief of losing my relationship with Marcus felt overwhelming. I had invested nearly 3 decades of love, energy, and hope in that bond, only to discover that he saw me primarily as a financial resource to be managed and eventually harvested. But as time passed, I began to appreciate the freedom that came with knowing the truth about people's motivations. No longer did I have to wonder why their visits felt strained or why their concerns seemed somehow calculating. I no longer had to question my own perceptions or doubt my ability to understand social dynamics. I also discovered a strength I had not known I possessed. Standing up to Marcus and Jessica, protecting my assets and autonomy, choosing my dignity over family harmony. These actions revealed capabilities that had been dormant during my years as a devoted wife and mother. My volunteer work with senior advocacy became deeply meaningful as I shared my experience with others facing similar situations. Family financial abuse is far more common than most people realize, and my story helped other older adults recognize warning signs and take protective action before they became victims. I learned to live fully in the present rather than sacrificing my current happiness for relationships that existed more in my imagination than in reality. The son I had loved and protected was not the man who had tried to manipulate me. Accepting that painful truth allowed me to invest my emotional energy in connections that were genuine and reciprocal. 1 year later, I can honestly say that I am happier and more at peace than I have been since David's death. My life is smaller in some ways with fewer family obligations and expectations, but it is also more authentic, more aligned with my actual values and boundaries. Sometimes I wonder if Marcus will ever truly understand what he lost when he chose money over relationship manipulation over honesty. I hope that someday he will develop the character and wisdom to build genuine connections with others. But that growth is his responsibility, not mine. The most important lesson I learned is that age brings wisdom, not vulnerability. The experience and knowledge accumulated over decades are powerful tools for protecting ourselves and maintaining our dignity. We do not become helpless simply because we grow older, and we should never allow anyone to convince us otherwise. Trust is a gift that should be earned and cherished, not assumed and exploited. When people show us their true character through their actions, we should believe them rather than making excuses for behavior that violates our boundaries and values. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for someone is to refuse to enable their worst impulses. By protecting myself from Marcus's scheme, I also protected him from becoming the kind of person who successfully steals from his own mother. Consequences can be gifts even when they feel like punishments. I want to leave you with this thought. Never underestimate the power of an older woman who has learned to value herself more than keeping peace with people who don't respect her. Sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is say no to those we love most, especially when they mistake our love for weakness. Have you ever had to make a difficult choice between family loyalty and protecting yourself? I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please give it a like and share it with someone who might need to hear this message. And don't forget to subscribe for more real-life stories about finding strength in unexpected places. Remember that your worth is not determined by others' treatment of you, and protecting yourself is never selfish. Take care and be kind to yourselves.